Hello everyone, welcome back to another remote sensing lecture video. And in this lecture video, I want to continue our discussion on image interpretation by talking about this idea of shape. Now, in the previous video, we talked about color and tone, and in this video, we're talking about shape. And honestly, color and tone and shape are probably the two most widely used measures of image interpretation, because if you know the color of something and you know the shape of something, it's generally going to get you a long way. So what I mean when I say shape can really mean two things. It can either be a specific shape, circle, square, diamond. It could be it could be a specific shape, or it could just be a description. Right, it could be long and skinny. It could be rounded. It could be wide. Right, so there's really a lot of different terms we can use to describe shape. But ideally what you're getting at is, again, just like with color, it's pretty straightforward. Right, you're getting at the shape of the object. So what I want to do in this video, again, is go through a couple of examples. But keep in mind, again, right, we can either have a specific shape, like if it looks like a specific shape, or we can just have a general description. Long and skinny, rounded, wide. You could also say curvy. Right? And it's sort of important to think about these things. And the thing with shape to remember, which is a little bit different than color, is that shape is going to look very different in an image than we're necessarily used to looking at or thinking about. So for example, if you think about a farm field, right, when you look out over a farm field, right, you're seeing it from the side. And so you may not necessarily be thinking about it from an aerial image. Now, I think a lot of us are a little bit more well-equipped to deal with the idea of aerial imagery shapes, given that we live in a time with Google Earth and Google Maps being so prevalent, that we're just sort of more used to this idea of aerial imagery, I think, than maybe we were even 20 years ago. So hopefully this won't be as novel of a concept, and you'll have an easier time transitioning between the sort of side-on view that we're used to in everyday life to more of that top-down aerial imagery view. So what I want to do is I want to go through a couple of example objects just to sort of give you this idea of specific versus description and why shape is really important in contrast to just knowing the color. So let's go ahead and let's look at some examples that have specific shapes. So in this image right here, this first image, right, we would sort of hopefully pick up on this object right here. And you would hopefully recognize that by its shape as the pentagon. Right, and again, the shape is actually in the name of the building. Right, so in this case, you can really easily identify a specific building because you know the shape, and it's a very distinct shape. You don't see too many pentagon-shaped buildings out there. Right, so in this case, shape plays a very critical role. Because if I were to say, oh, it's just if the color is just gray, that could mean anything. Right, but if I say it's a gray pentagon, you're far more likely to hopefully understand that I'm talking about the pentagon. And if you're looking at the image, you'd say, oh yeah, that's the pentagon. So let's talk about this middle image right here. All right, hopefully everybody recognizes this thing right here. As a sports field. Now we'll talk about something called context later on, but for now, right, when I say green rectangle, you're probably thinking either farm field, some sort of well-managed lawn, or a sport field, right? So if I just said, oh, it's green, right, that could mean any number of things. If I say it's a green rectangle, that probably narrows it down some, and we're going to go through again some other of these visual variables to get more and more refined to the point where you would feel confident in saying this is indeed a football field. And this is this next one here. Again, right, so let's just label this as a football field. Right, we know that because it's a green rectangle. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to this one here. So what are these? Well, I would draw your attention to this shape right here, this shape right here, and this shape right here. Right? If I were to take away the image and you saw me draw those shapes, you would probably already get a good idea that what this is a baseball diamond or a baseball field. Right? This is a baseball field. And again, you know that because living in America, you've probably seen a baseball diamond and realized that it has a shape like this. You have a diamond in the middle, and then you have these two sort of conic shapes coming off of it. Right? Again, I'm not trying to belabor the point too much, but the idea is that with shape, we have things that we're sort of used to seeing. And when we see them, it's really recognizable. So these are sort of specific shapes, right? Rectangle, diamond, pentagon. But let's talk about an example or go through an example where it's not necessarily a specific shape, but it's more of a description. So what I want to do is in this image, I want to differentiate between the road right here and the parking lot right here. Right, because they're both gray. So in this particular instance, right, color isn't particularly useful, right? They're both gray, they both have lines. But how is it looking at this that we know that this is a road and this is a parking lot? Right? Well, this has to do with the idea of a descriptive shape, right? It's not that it's a specific shape, right? Roads tend to be long and skinny. Whereas parking lots tend to be shorter and wide, right? The road, I just kind of drew this little piece here, but the road keeps going, right? The road keeps going, right? Versus the parking lot, or it's not going to keep going, right? It's smaller, it's shorter, and it's typically wider, right? Parking lots are typically a lot wider than the road. So this is an idea where we're not saying, oh, it's specifically a rectangle or, oh, it's specifically a diamond, right? We're using these descriptions of the shape is long and skinny or the shape is short and wide to differentiate two things that would both be the same color, right? If I were to say, oh, it's gray concrete, you'd be like, okay, well, is it a road or a parking lot? Or maybe is it a rooftop, right? And so this description of, oh, it's a long, skinny gray piece of concrete, you'd be far more likely to think road or sidewalk than you would to think parking lot. All right, so hopefully this makes sense as to how shape can be used. Again, it can be this sort of description, or it can be this idea of specific shapes that we would hopefully have a strong association with. Hopefully that makes sense. If any of this doesn't make sense, I encourage you to reach out. Thank you.